So good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to the ICBE Advanced Productivity Skillnet webinar, a lunchtime webinar on what is Toyota Kata with Susan Clancy, Managing Director of BPI Services, ConnectWrx, and founder of Kata School Ireland. By way of introduction to Susan, Susan founded her own business in 2006, covering the fields of Lean, Six Sigma, and business performance improvement, and has been engaged by multiple sectors across the globe. Through BPI Services, she provides coaching, mentoring, and training on focus solutions for organizations. Susan believes in a Kata-centric approach and develops people to become change leaders who are skilled, confident, and goal-orientated. Susan recently set up Kata School Ireland and is co-founder of ConnectWrx, a software development startup focusing on bringing lean tools into the digital age. Today's webinar will focus on three areas: the origins of Toyota Kata, research questions that Mike Rother explored in Toyota, what is Kata and why is Kata unique, and how you initiate Kata in your own organization. The ground rules for today: Susan will present for about 20 minutes. Please post questions and comments in the chat function as we move through the presentation. For now, everybody will be muted, and where we encounter problems with broadband, please bear with us in case we need to pause the camera. Today's session is being recorded, and for now, I will pass you over to Susan and we will get started.
Brilliant. Thank you, Clodagh. Thank you, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank the ICBE for allowing me to speak to you on this topic. And secondly, I'd really like to thank you, the participants and attendees, for taking time out of your day today to listen to what I've got to say. And I hope I will impart some interesting learning to you. So, as Clodagh said, my own name is Susan Clancy. I'm Managing Director of BPI Services and ConnectWrx, and recently founder of the Kata School Ireland. So what's my story? So basically, I've been working in the area of continuous improvement since 2001. And to be honest, continuous improvement has often felt like an additional ask for organizations. I sometimes felt maybe I should have chosen a different career path. Maybe I should have sold machines, because in organizations we need machines and we look after them, and we feel that we can't do our day-to-day without them. And sometimes, you know, continuous improvement has felt like something separate, something additional, something outside of the day-to-day. So I've been constantly challenging myself and my clients with, you know, really how do we go about ingraining continuous improvement into the day-to-day operations. And I suppose just a prelude to today, I began my Kata journey in August of last year, like a lot of us, maybe with a different schedule to our day. For me personally, a lot of time would have been spent in the car or on a plane prior to 2020. So I had lots of additional hours in my working week. And I filled a lot of those hours educating myself in Kata in the last year. Just before I get into the next stage, I'd really love to get a sense from you guys today of your experience in Kata. Maybe if you could use the raise hand function in Zoom for me. First of all, I'd like to get a sense of those of you who have experience in Kata and maybe are using it in your own organization. So could I get those of you who can associate with that, maybe to use the raise hand feature in your Zoom? Okay, great. Okay, so a couple of you using it in your organization currently. And then on the other side of that, can I get those of you to use that same feature for those of you who have not used Kata, know very little about it? Maybe you have some intro to it, but very, very little. Okay.
Yes, we have a good few hands there, Susan. Yeah.
Great. Okay, excellent. Okay, well, thank you for that, everybody. So that gives me a good sense. Okay. Okay, so the agenda for today that I'd like to cover with you, I'd like to talk to you about the two research questions that led to Toyota Kata. I'd like to explain to you what Toyota Kata is and why it is unique. and how you can initiate Kata in your own organization. So first of all, I'd like to introduce this gentleman to you. I'm going to borrow a lot of his slides in this presentation, and also from a colleague of mine in Canada, a professor called Sylvain Landry. So Mike Rother is the researcher behind Toyota Kata. If you don't recognize him by his image, you might recognize the book on the right, which he co-authored with a good colleague of his, John Shook, who worked in the Toyota Motor Company for many years, in 1998, and it helped a lot of us and a lot of organizations throughout the globe learn about value stream mapping and implement it in our own environments. So Mike Rother, from the period of 2004 to 2009, did several tours to Japan and Toyota, and in particular he wanted to study Toyota, a company that had been profitable for the last 60 years, albeit 1 year, and that were constantly, improving, staying inventive and adaptive, even though they were quite a mature company. So his two research questions that he wanted answers to was, what unseen managerial routines and thinking lie behind Toyota's success with continuous improvement and adaptation? And how can other companies develop similar routines and thinking in their organizations? And just, I suppose, to put some context behind this research, several tours to Japan, several observations. Interestingly enough, he wasn't allowed in on Toyota's meetings. So a lot of this was observation, questioning. As you can imagine, in Japan, it was translating. He would have brought a lot of this research then back to America. He had a number of organizations in the US who were trialing his research in their organizations. And he also has some German roots. So he was trialing some of this research in German companies as well. And the trialing and the observations and the learning and the collation of all this resulted in him publishing a book called Toyota Kata in 2009. So in relation to the first question, the unseen managerial routines and thinking that lie behind Toyota's success with continuous improvement and adaptation. Well, there's the visible stuff. There's the things we see. There's the results that we know that Toyota have. There's the lean tools and techniques, which we all know about and we've adapted and we have implemented in our own organizations to varying levels of success. But what he discovered was the less visible. And the first area of the less visible that he discovered was the systematic, scientific way of thinking and acting. So let's get into that in a little bit more detail. So we're stuck with a biased jump to conclusions brain. And, we don't always see the reality, but our brain gets plenty of signals and sensors going off to give us an interpretation of reality. And our brain jumps to conclusions based on a library of experiences that we build up since we were children. And our brain is constantly jumping to conclusions, filling in the blanks, going beyond our current knowledge threshold. Here's an example of it. I'm sure you all said, can you read this? And our brain works pretty good, well enough, but maybe not always. And as a result of how our brain functions, at all times, all of the following are potentially biased and unreliable. Our assumptions, our opinions, our perceptions, our memory, and our perspective. So scientific thinking is a way of approaching situations, goals, and problems that's characterized by, number one, acknowledging that our comprehension is always incomplete and possibly wrong. Number two, assuming that answers will be found by test rather than just deliberation. We make predictions and we test them with experiments. And number three, appreciating what differences exist between a prediction and what actually happens can be a really useful source of learning and adjustment. So think about it like navigating with a compass rather than a map. And scientific thinking, as a result, may be the best means we currently have for navigating through complex, dynamic, unpredictable territory, which is life. But certainly, I think we can all resonate with what we've gone throughout the globe in the last year. that maybe scientific thinking is something that would be really, really useful. We have a lot of knowledge, but there's no guarantee that past experiences will be consistent with future situations. And let's face it, I think that's particularly true in our current climate. What's really fascinating and interesting and beautiful to see is that Jeffrey Liker released his second edition of Toyota, the Toyota Way, which I'm sure a lot of you have. He released this earlier this year. And this is a model that he would have published in his first edition, but he wouldn't have had scientific thinking in the middle of it. And this is something new that he's added. So somebody like Jeffrey Liker, who's world renowned with the highly successful Toyota Way book, has recognized that scientific thinking is core to the Toyota Way as a system. So, in relation to the first question, a systematic scientific way of thinking and acting. In relation to the second question, or second answer to this question, Mike rather defined managers, and I suppose based on his observations, managers teaching their people this way of thinking. So this is a nice segue to Kata. So what is Kata? So Kata is a routine that we practice in order to learn a skill. And through that ongoing practice, the routine of Kata just becomes second nature to us. Think of cycling or driving or swimming. And when you think of driving, you know, we do not consciously think about controlling the vehicle. We simply focus on the road. So this led to the creation of two models, the improvement Kata and the coaching Kata. So there are 4 steps to the improvement Kata model. The first one is about getting the direction or challenge. What is the strategic objective that we're striving towards? And this could be maybe 6 months, 9 months, 12 months out. The next area is where we're grasping the current condition. Where are we now? The next step is about establishing our next target condition. And what you find is that there could be multiple target conditions to get to your direction or challenge. And typically target conditions are in the range of about 2 to 3 weeks. And there's something very nice about that we're striving for something that North Star 6, 9, 12 months out, but in 3 weeks' time, this is where I hope to be. And then we're conducting a series of experiments to get there. So imagine we're here and we want to be here, and we have a series of obstacles and unclear territory that we need to navigate through. So a good colleague of mine, Sylvain Landry, kindly allowed me to use this slide, which I think depicts this really beautifully. So imagine we enter in a warehouse and it's completely dark and we need to get to the other side. And all we have is a flash lamp or a torch. And as we progress through the warehouse with that distance in front of us throughout of all that we can see, to try and get to the other side and overcome any obstacles that are in our way, we eventually get to the other side of the warehouse in small steps with a limited view each time. And after each step we eventually get to the other side. So this is similarly in terms of conducting these experiments. Imagine we have our flashlight or our torch, we have our threshold of knowledge, and then we take a series of steps, a series of plan, do, check, act cycles and experiments to get where we need to get to in establishing our next target condition. So Toyota Kata helps us advance through uncharted territories, where we are and where we want to be. And what you learn in one step may influence what you do in the next step. And it's all about taking these small steps. What do we expect to happen? What actually happens? And using that comparison as a great learning opportunity that might influence us in taking our next step, all towards our next target condition. Within Kata, there's a learner storyboard, and it might look similar to storyboards you've seen in the past, but there is a lot of nuances to it that are a little different. For example, in the plan, do, check, act cycles record, we log the date of the step, the obstacle we're addressing, which might come from this obstacles parking lot, the next step we're going to take, our expectation, ever before we do the step, what do we expect? By when, which is usually a day. So in the next 24 hours, I'm going to conduct this step. And then we come back tomorrow and we talk about what actually happened and what did we learn. And we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on that experience. So, two models created by Mike Rother and codified, I suppose, based on his observations and his research. The improvement kata, which has 4 steps that I've outlined. And the second model is the coaching kata. So here, for example, we see a daily coaching cycle. The learner with their storyboard and the coach holding a 5 coaching kata question card. So these are the 5 question starter kata, as it's known as. And it has these 5 questions that the coach will ask the learner. What is your target condition? What is the actual condition now? What did you plan as your last step? What did you expect? What actually happened? And what did you learn? What obstacles do you think are preventing you from reaching the target condition? Which one are you actually addressing now? What is your next step or your next experiment? What do you expect and how quickly, which hopefully is usually a day, can we come back and see what you've learned from taking that step? And there are different roles within kata. There's a team of a learner with a storyboard and a team who own the target condition and work to achieve it. There is a coach who may not initially be, but is certainly the longer term view, and the aspiration is that it is the learner's manager, is the coach, who is responsible for teaching the improvement kata and for the results. And then there is a second coach who attends maybe periodically, once or twice a week, and is the coach to the coach. And it's worth noting here and pointing out, if you went to a Toyota facility in the morning, you wouldn't see kata, you wouldn't see storyboards. This was a series of observations and research that was conducted with Mike Rother and a number of other colleagues and organizations, and was codified as Toyota Kata. In actual fact, interestingly enough, Mike Rother wanted to term his first book Beyond What We See, which I think is a really good explanation of it. The invisible, you know, beyond, because thinking is invisible. But as you can imagine, publishers like snazzy names, and Toyota Kata was probably going to sell more books off the shelves than Beyond What You Can See. But just to make that point, this is what Mike Rother codified, I suppose, from his observations and his research. But a fish doesn't know it's in water. So, first research question, hopefully, is you have a bit more clarity on it. What unseen managerial routines and thinking lie behind Toyota's success? A systematic scientific way of thinking and acting, and managers teaching their people this way of thinking, and managers as a coach. And the second question was, how can other companies develop similar routines and thinking in their organizations? So hoping to create new behaviors by explaining or trying to convince people, you know, doesn't really work. And I think we all know that. Models alone don't change our behaviors. So there was 3 phases to Rother's research. His study of how Toyota managers operate and think. His description of those observations and research with 2 models, the improvement kata and the coaching kata. And then beyond that, which is really unique, was developing this starter kata practice routines to help others develop similar thinking and skills. You can see the 5 questions card there, very specific, very prescriptive. Wonderful for us to have this, to use it so that we can concentrate on thinking and listening, on listening rather than thinking, because we have questions here that we just ask and we can actually concentrate on listening to the answers. So it takes deliberate practice. It's not difficult to scientifically think, but it isn't our default mode. Remember back earlier, I talked about our default mode is to jumping to conclusions. And we need frequent practice to make it a deliberate practice. We need enthusiasm, you know, and reassurance that we're getting better. meaningful application. We have to practice on something that's important to us as learners. And we need to be coached with corrective feedback to ensure the learner practices the right patterns. And for this reason, might rather give us a number of starter kata, structured routines for beginners to practice the fundamentals. And there are a number of these starter practice routines that are outlined in his third book, the Toyota Kata Practice Guide, which was released in 2018. And here are some of them. So the storyboard, it is a starter kata. The current condition, target condition form, again, has a lovely prescriptive method for us to follow and to get good at before we might adapt it and tweak it. Establishing a target condition, our process analysis, our experimenting record, our obstacles parking lot, and our 5 questions coaching card. And by doing these daily cycles, we'll trigger new behaviors and we will get our results and we will grow our scientific response habits. So why is Kata unique? If you pick up this book, you'll see a lot of tools and techniques that probably will look very familiar to you. And from my own perspective, certainly back in August last year, I've been a CI practitioner since 2001. It's just another tool, right? Well, actually, I was wrong. And for me, I found that, and I'm trying to depict here maybe what I thought and what I knew versus what I now know is Kata. So for me, lean tools and techniques, something that is typically done every couple of months, every couple of weeks, or at best every couple of days. Kata is a daily routine for a short duration of time, typically 20 minutes or less. Typically, our lean tools and techniques are often led by a lean team or yellow, green, black belt, whereas Kata, the end goal of this, even though you may not start at this level, is that ideally it is led by the manager or supervisor of a team. Typically focused on eliminating waste and problem-solving methods from lean tools and techniques, whereas Kata is a means for developing scientific skills, behavior, and mindset rather than a tool or solution to be implemented. Tools and techniques sometimes centered on having all the answers and expertise. I know I certainly was in that position where that was the expectation of me and the services I provided. Whereas Kata, and this has taken me a lot to learn, I can't jump to conclusions. I don't have all the answers. In fact, it's actually, I have to go in blind and figure out that I'll be finding my answers by test rather than just deliberating. Lean tools and techniques usually seen as a method to implement rather than Toyota Kata. It's not a method to implement, but a practice methodology to utilize to help you change your culture to a culture of continuous improvement. The lean tools, the 5S, the Kanban cards, very visible in Toyota Kata, not visible at all. And the expectation certainly is that, from a lean tools and techniques perspective, that you become an expert and you progress to different levels. Where in Kata, the idea is that you would fulfill a constant learner, coach, second coach loop. While you might be a coach in one instance, you might be a learner in another, and you would constantly rotate those roles. But the good news is that all the lean tools and techniques and all that knowledge and all those practices and principles we've adopted so well, especially in this country, are not gone to waste. We still use them. They're still very, very relevant, but they're housed under a foundation of the improvement kata, which is our systematic scientific way of thinking and acting, and our coaching kata, where we've managers as coaches teaching this way of thinking and acting. And it's the importance of small steps making a big impact. So starter kata, a place to start, to get, to begin with, to help you get started, to navigate maybe those smooth waters. But then we get into that complex, dynamic, unpredictable territory, and be reassured that you've trained for this and you've got it. So does it feel awkward? Yes, it does. It feels stiff, uncomfortable, prescriptive, but that's a good sign. It means we're rewiring our neural paths for something new. So we don't know what the future will be. We don't know the obstacles we will one day have to overcome. The success of our organizations does not depend so much on the solutions put in place at any given moment, but on our ability to continually learn through action in a constantly changing environment. And what's fascinating is, you know, the following top in demand jobs today barely existed 10 years ago. An Uber driver. We're currently preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. And we're using technologies that haven't been invented in order to solve problems. We don't even know our problems yet. So how can organizations start using Kata? So there's several reading materials out there. The Toyota Kata website is really informative. There's a lot of material here. And that's one thing about the Kata community that I've been lucky to be a part of this last year. The amount of available research and information and the willingness to share it is just really wonderful. My colleague that I mentioned earlier, Sylvain Landry in Montreal, has a treasure trove of resources. As mentioned earlier, I recently set up Kata School Ireland only in the last number of weeks, and I would love if some of you or all of you would like to be a part of it. We're in good company. We were the 13th school to be established in the world. Lucky 13. I was born on the 13th, so I hope it's a lucky number. And our aim is where people can attend weekly learner and coaching meetings, participate in introduction, 1 hour overview meetings. A lot of these events will run free of charge. The ICBE, I know, will support folks as well with some of these events. Participate in a Kata in the classroom workshop, an improvement Kata immersion workshop that we're planning on running. And I really hope as well we'll have a number of webinars with guest speakers. We're very networked with all the Kata schools across the world, but in particular, Kata School Cascadia, whose members are Kata coaches who would have actually worked with Mike Rother to test his research back in the noughties. In terms of internal learning, it's about being aware of it, able to do it and able to teach it. Think of swimming. You know, think of your coach here with the swimmers, and one of the swimmers, no doubt, is saying, you know, when can I go on my own? But master the fundamentals first, and then eventually moving to performing situationally. Outlined in Mike Rodder's practice book is this concept of learning groups, where you might be a learner in one focus group, you might be a second coach in another, and a coach in another, where you can practice in your learning groups internally until you master the skills. Maybe if you have the advantage of having an external coach to get you on your way, you can start maybe with some initial workshops, establish your learning groups, have your external coach begin coaching those learning groups, start coaching one another, where your external help is moving into a second coach role and you're starting to become self-sufficient. And again, a lot of this can be done virtually. There are a lot of organizations out there who have deployed Kata to great success. There's a lot of information out there in YouTube and in various Kata communities. A lot of Kata conferences as well. A lot of these people speak about their successes of Kata. And what can you expect if you follow this path? To practice daily in your learning groups as a learner coach and second coach, to develop scientific thinking, habits and behaviors, to transform to a manager as a coach culture, to develop skills and capabilities of the improvement Kata and coaching Kata, a common language and way of acting across your organization, navigate complex challenges and change your culture to a culture of continuous improvement, and achieve a learning organization mindset and continual improvement. And practice makes perfect, and practice makes permanent. And this is something just in around the Kata code. Conditions are unpredictable, enjoy the learning zone, understand your direction, grasp the current condition, establish your target condition and experiment. Beginners practice the starter Kata exactly. Have a coach, be a coach. And these are some of the timelines you can expect to progress. And I'm just going to finally leave you just with a few words from Mike Rother. I think he says it beautifully, far better than I could.
So basically, What we have here with Improvement Kata and Coaching Kata is taking a scientific thinking pattern, which is that 4-step model that you saw, and we're combining it with routines or principles of deliberate practice. Now, scientific thinking is not new. It's very old, about 400 years old as we know it. Deliberate practice is not new. Sports and music, it's been around for a long time. But I think combining those two things is a little bit unique. To create a scientific meta skill, deliberate practice takes it out of the world of scientists in the laboratory with their white jackets and makes it a life skill that anybody can practice. I think we were about eliminating waste in the 20th century. I don't think you can cut your way to greatness. So I think in the 21st century, lean means, what is our strategic objective? What do we want to do as a group? And I can assure you that whatever we want to do as a group, if we manage ourselves well, we can achieve it. It is amazing what every one of us carries around on top of our spinal column. And all you got to do is get it to the point where you feel the pull of the rope in your hands toward whatever it is your organization wants to achieve, which may be efficiency today, but tomorrow maybe it's something else. And so my wish for you is best wishes for your practice, best wishes for achieving your goals, but more than that, just enjoy it. It is so much fun to work in a team. Sigma points here they're going to talk about today. It is so much fun to work in a team and achieve things and realize what we can achieve. I think once you do that as a manager, you can't go back. You can't go back to command and control. So that's my wish for you, that you experience that teamwork. We're on the planet for a short time of brains working together toward a shared goal and working scientifically and effectively. Good luck.